look around your reality and to find a way to pull something from within yourself that says this should change and I should be the one to start that change, and to collaborate on that change. I think it was truly reflective of a great man, because I think it's easier for those who have multiple examples in front of them to line up to be one of the first examples. Is something that takes true bravery and courage, because you have nothing to look up to, everything to look forward to. But ultimately, not only does your environment not reflect the will of the people that you've grown up with, that environment is anti your freedom, and in that space, Dr. Sam Nujoma planted that seed, which has blossomed into Namibia's freedom, and truly something worth reflecting on with utmost awe.
Absolutely. I mean, he's probably the first leader of our country who took a national approach to the struggle. Remember, we have so many heroes in our country, but because of the circumstances of the times, they were more confined to their ethnic boundaries, defending their territories against the Germans or whatever. Sam Nujoma is part of the first generation of leaders who said, we are no longer going to fight as Vambus, as Hereros, as Namas, Damaras, whatever. We are now going to find each other as a people. Just wage.
Just on that point, we do have a clip of Dr. Sam Nujoma talking about the importance of unity within Namibia, within Africa. Please have a look.
We must remain vigilant and disciplined too. And we must have respect among ourselves. A nation without respect among its ranks and file will never be able to stand on its own feet, let alone fighting a fascist regime like that to border and defeat it. Therefore, unity here is the sharp weapon. Unity is the sharp weapon. Next to a gun, even if you have a gun, you have no morale. Like those puppets, the boys have trained thousands of puppets, including mercenaries. But even they admit the fact that one SWAPO combatant is worth 100 South African soldiers. It is true, because he or she has the morale, and she knows that she's fighting for a right cause. And those ones puppets, they are bribed with the money. They are fighting for money. They are selling the country for money. How do you sell a country for money? A country is for the people. It's there to stay. In fact, Namibia doesn't belong to us alone. Namibia belongs to the African continent. It belongs to Zambia. It belongs to Angola. It belongs to Algeria. In as much as Zambia belongs to us.
So, as you were saying, a man that valued unity without a doubt above all things. He said Namibia belongs to the Zambians, just as Africa belongs to Namibia, Namibia belongs to Africa. Now we are going as gradually as possible through Dr. Sam Nujoma's great life. Now, in the late 1940s, he moved to Windhoek, where he worked as a railway clerk. It was during this time that he began to witness the systemic oppression of apartheid, which would shape his future as a liberation leader. According to the Namibian, Nujoma often recounted how the harsh working conditions and racial segregation he experienced in Windhoek fueled his determination to fight for freedom. His early years in the capital also exposed him to the growing political consciousness among Namibian workers, laying the groundwork for his future activism. Truly, so he came to Windhoek, and it seems like for him the pressures became really palpable and multiplied, because it was in every section, in every corner, everything said inequality. You fast forward to today, proudly there's a statue of Dr. Sam Nujoma in the very same Windhoek that he first identified to be highly oppressive. And not first identified, but he identified he was also spurred on by Namibian workers who were oppressed at that time, and we understand what happened with regards to industrialization and how workers were moved all over the place during that time, and how unfair that entire system was.
Absolutely. I mean, what is inspiring for me mostly about that version of events is that he was a young person, and coming from the north, coming to this unfamiliar territory called Windhoek, and finding what he found and saying, no, but this cannot be correct. This is our country. We ought to be equal. We ought to be treated better. But for me, what inspires me about especially that part of his life is his relative young age, because even of course I don't want to preempt you because we are going to head then in a moment. But even the age at which he left the country, it's unbelievable.
Yes,
he was 30 years old only.
Wow.
Go around today around town and find your everyday 30-year-olds. And find
most likely staying with their parents. To be
absolutely,
honest.
And without a care in the world as far as what is happening in the country is concerned. So, and because there remains injustices in our country under the current government, where you see very few people saying no, but this cannot be right. Exploitation of workers, many things, the red line, and other things, but. Very few young people are interested in stuff like that. So we draw a lot of inspiration from Tatekulu Nujoma's time as a young person.
I mean, and you look at, guys like me who I had the privilege of showing up on Earth the same year Namibia became independent, 1990. So all I knew was the statesman. You know what I mean? And, when we protest and we do activism, we really forget the true roots of what we're doing, and also understanding that we are doing it within a system that allows us to do it in a manner that they certainly were not allowed to protest. And that's the part that people really need to reflect on as well, just understanding that he was first an activist.
Yes.
He was first a man who saw something was wrong, and he said, we have to change this as a society. And the fruit of that was Namibia's liberation. Of course, with erstwhile comrades like Toivo, who I believe you are named after.
Yes.
Comrades who fought alongside, who suffered on Robben Island. All these folks didn't need anyone to tell them that they had to affect change. They saw what they saw, and they saw that they had to play a role in affecting a different reality for Namibia.
Absolutely. No, that's true. And for me, because I suppose it's time for us to start asking ourselves as Namibians now some of the lessons. I mean, some of the conversations in the coming days will be around, if this was who you said Nujoma was, what have you taken? What have you tapped? Yeah.
Where's the evidence in your life?
Yeah, exactly.
Taken?
Yeah. Or even going forward, at least.
At least, yeah.
To
What are
say
you
going
taking
forward,
from this moment?
what are you taking with you from Sam Nujoma? Because for me, for example, he was this inspirational leader.
Absolutely.
Like you are abroad, people who have never seen you, but somehow you managed to inspire people even inside the country and the international community to believe in what you are saying.
Absolutely.
It's enormous.
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. Continuing with his early life in the late 1950s, Nujoma became increasingly involved in political activism, as we've reflected. In 1959, the year my father was born, he co-founded the Ovamboland People's Organization, OPO, which later evolved into the Southwest Africa People's Organization, SWAPO, in 1960. Nujoma was elected as SWAPO's first president, a position he held for decades. His leadership was marked by a commitment to uniting Namibians across ethnic and regional divides to fight for independence. Now, one of the defining moments of this period was the Old Location Massacre in Windhoek on December 10, 1959, where South African forces killed 11 peaceful protesters. This tragedy galvanized Nujoma and SWAPO, solidifying their resolve to resist apartheid rule. In 1966, SWAPO launched an armed struggle against South African forces, marking the beginning of the Namibian War of Independence. Old Location Massacre.
That was the turning point because it was actually a few days later that Nujoma actually left the country. After the skirmishes in what was called the old location, which is present-day Auckland Park, where black people were being moved to Katutura. They were told to leave Auckland Park, and they protested, leading to the to that fight. So it was late in December 1959 that he left the country with the assistance of Chief Hosea Kutako, escaping via Botswana all the way to Tanganyika, present-day Tanzania, to mobilize the international support for the Namibian cause. 30 years old.
Wow.
Leaving his wife, young children here. If that cannot inspire you as a young person to say a 30-year-old man married and leaving his wife and kids behind to go to a place that he doesn't know.
Yes.
You've never been out of the country before, but you just hear there's a country called Botswana, you can go through there and go all the way. That, for me, is incredible.
Yes.
And what followed afterwards, really, it's because 1959, that killing of Kakurukade Mungunda and others is when they decided there's no way that the word of mouth is going to unlock this impasse. So we had to do something else, and he did that.
Absolutely. I mean, he did. You look at him going to Tanzania, Mwakangale, if I'm not mistaken, was the name on Dr. Sam Nujoma's passport. I think that's such a beautiful name. That was the name he was using in Tanzania. And this is why also in that speech we saw where he was speaking on unity, why he emphasized the unity of other African nations, because he needed that safe passage. He needed the assistance of intel. At that time, I can believe only really Zambia had attained independence, if I'm not mistaken. It was around that same year, close enough to there. I think 1964 would have been there. But, you know, comrades like Kenneth Kaunda, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, obviously Nelson Mandela, who, you know, of course his mobility was fairly limited, but this was the Tanganyika Brotherhood. And that's something also worth mentioning, that he's the last one standing.
Oh, absolutely. The
was rather.
Yeah, he was. Because remember, even when you spoke about his election in 1960 as president of SWAPO,
yes.
He was not even here.
He was not here. Wow.
So he was elected as president of SWAPO in absentia.
Wow.
That's what I'm talking about, that inspiration, that leaders must inspire.
Yes.
If you can inspire people to have confidence in you, even in your absence,
yes.
At the age of, that would have been just around 31 years of age, it's unbelievable.
Yes.
In fact, he was still 30 in April 1960 when because he was turning 31 only the next month in May, 1960. So a 30-year-old leader,
wow,
being elected in absentia to become the leader of a liberation movement.
Wow.
So when we talk about that young man there, Traore
in Burkina
Faso, that, and he's of course older than 30 now, I believe, but you can see the kind of inspiration that's where some of this inspiration is coming from. It could be from Nujoma, it could be from Mandela and everybody else, but the pioneers of the African struggle were young people.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you mentioned Traore, I think of his political father, Thomas Sankara, who was also young. You know, and you know, for Sam Nujoma to be elected in absentia means that even as he left, his character and value was too tangible to the people. He had, in my opinion, surpassed simply just being a Namibian human being. He had become an idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the preservation of this idea was essential.
Absolutely. And just to add to that, the fact that Chief Hosea Kutako of Herero was able to assist a man from another tribe, that is also the start. That was also around the start of Namibians seeing themselves as one. No longer, the Hereros are fighting their own battle there. The Namas are fighting their own battles. They started seeing each other as one people. And if it wasn't for that, there's no way that Chief Hosea Kutako would have facilitated the passage of Sam Nujoma into Botswana.
Without a doubt. We'll be continuing with the life and times of Dr. Sam Shafiishuna Daniel Nujoma, who passed away on Saturday, the 8th of February at 11:45 p.m. Let's have yet another look at the visual tribute video dedicated to this great man. We are mourning Dr. Sam Shafiishuna Nujoma, the founding father of Namibia, and indeed the nation is mourning. Let's have a look at some of the comments that folks have been sending in as we pay tribute to this great, great man. One says, rest easy, founding father, God of the nation, and Namibians, first-time president, fly high, Tatekulu. You have fought a good fight, our hero. Lina Akamba says, rest in peace, Tatekulu, the founding father of the Namibian nation. Powerful visuals, as you can see right there. She continues to say that your legacy lives on. Heartbroken, understandably so. Samuele Evans Samwele also sharing his remarks on social media. Very sad news indeed. He says the month of February is a bad month for Namibia, as all our most important people died. And at the beginning of this month, we understand what he's referring to, knowing that Dr. Hageji Geingob died on the 4th of February last year. He continues to say that as a nation, we mourn a leader whose leadership qualities went beyond the borders of our country, and his legacy will live forever. He goes on to say that a baobab tree has fallen, but its seeds have spread to the entire country, and that is truly how it feels. You know, they say that when we lose our elders, we lose trees.
Yeah.
It's like losing a tree, it's losing knowledge over, you know, this is close to a century, you know, worth of impact with regards to the Namibian people. Continuing with the life of Dr. Sam Nujoma, he spent over 30 years in exile, mobilizing international support for Namibia's cause. He traveled extensively, garnering backing from the United Nations, the Organization of African Unity, and nations across the globe, now particularly in Africa and the Eastern Bloc. According to New Era, one of Namibia's publications, Nujoma's diplomatic efforts were instrumental in securing resolutions from the UN General Assembly and Security Council, which condemned South Africa's illegal occupation of Namibia. You know, in contrast, you look at the story of Nelson Mandela. The person who could really run around was Winnie Mandela, and run around she did. Shafiishuna Nujoma had to do it by himself, not necessarily by himself, of course, with the support of comrades. But as you're saying, such a brave undertaking, truly.
Yeah, I mean, you are right. When he when he left, he was alone. You know, many others, when they left the country, they were in the company of each other. I know, for example, that current president, Nangola Mbumba, escaped with Nahas Angula and 2 others, who I cannot remember now, from Oshigambo High School, leaving the country. And I'm not trying to say that those who left in groups are not brave enough.
No, certainly not.
I'm just saying that, you know, to embark on a trip alone into the unknown, you know, going into countries that you do not know, that was just incredible. But in terms of what you just mentioned, the mobilization of the international community, if you want to see how difficult that is, take any rebel group today, your M23s in Eastern Congo, UNITA in Angola. Maybe UNITA succeeded in some way to mobilize international support for themselves. But any organization that is branded a terrorist organization to fight, to negotiate its way into the hearts of your UN General Assemblies, your Eastern Bloc countries, and all these kind of things, it's no small feat.
100%.
It's a huge thing. And to add to that, to have SWAPO recognized as the sole representative of the aspirations of the Namibian people by the international community, it was simply unbelievable when an organization is branded as a terrorist organization, a guerrilla organization, being seen as a sole representative of the aspirations and self-determination of the Namibian people, and that position gets adopted formally by the UN, is such a huge achievement. Because if it wasn't for that, there's no way that we would have been, if the UN condemned SWAPO also.
Oh, yes.
Then what we have today wouldn't have been achieved.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Let's get more into the details of that process. Dr. Nujoma's relentless diplomacy did lead to the adoption of UN Resolution 435 in 1978, which laid the groundwork for Namibia's transition to independence. Now, this resolution called for a ceasefire, the withdrawal of South African troops, and free elections under UN supervision. However, it took another decade of negotiations and a brutal war before Namibia finally gained its freedom on March 21, 1990, with Dr. Shafiishuna Daniel Nujoma as its first president. Yes, it took, I mean, wow. You get on the negotiating table at only 10 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there was a huge pushback from the apartheid regime here in Namibia, backed by some powerful nations.
Including, I'd say, Israel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Not in Namibia, in South Africa, I know Israel, but apartheid was essentially one system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, powerful nations in the West, the American government also of the time, it was perhaps around 1978 there that President Reagan, if I'm not mistaken, really started threatening South Africa. That's why even when he passed recently, Jimmy Carter, yes. Yeah, sorry. Yes. Absolutely. Sorry. Yeah. Jimmy Carter was actually instrumental in that process, because when he died recently, we wrote, we published on the Namibian Sun platforms a letter that he wrote around that time, 1978, I think, to South Africa, you know, isolating them completely, saying that, you know, you have to let these people be, allow people to determine their self-determination, their own future, their own path. And but unfortunately, Jimmy Carter was only a one-term president. He was not re-elected, I think, 2 years later after that, and that push died with his presidency. So it's such a huge breakthrough. In the 1980s, that decade was probably the most brutal as far as this war is concerned. Remember this war, Sam Nujoma went in exile in 1960 for 5 years and 8 months, 1960 to August 1966. He was just mobilizing and setting up things because the first bullet that was fought as far as this struggle is concerned went off on August 26, 1966 in Ongulumbashi. So for 5 years he was just putting things in place. And the 70s passed, his war. We were in Zambia. Then Zambia was being threatened by South Africa and other nations to say that you are hosting terrorists. You have, and Zambia suffered also because South Africa would occasionally go into Zambia, bomb the country to threaten them that you must kick SWAPO out. And President Kaunda was also getting under growing pressure from home. People who are saying you are risking us. But he was a visionary saying, look, these people cannot fight from their own country. They will be annihilated. They are here to seek refuge, attack, and go back. Even the 26 August attack was waged from Zambia. Those guys walked through the along the borders, arrived in Amsati region, bombed the military there of South Africa. Some of them died, of course. Others retreated into Angola and then go back to Zambia. So the 1980s in particular, because that is also now when personally I was born in the early 80s myself, and as a child born in a village that borders Angola. And by that time, in the 80s, SWAPO had left Zambia. They were accommodated in Angola. I saw war. War, people, you know, because the South Africans had this tactic of walking around with dead bodies in the villages to scare people, to say, if you don't listen to us, this will happen to you. These were the images. As a child, a 5-year-old, seeing dead bodies on Caspias and all these military cars, vehicles. So it was bad.
I mean, that's truly traumatic. I mean, just thinking back to what that can mean with regards to, you know, just even as your development as a child, so many children were traumatized. So just so I get this clear, dead bodies were being paraded around, and this was obviously to deflate the spirit of revolution.
Absolutely. I mean, and they went around. They would come in your homestead, and they would beat up children in order to, because they would come in our houses and ask, where have you seen SWAPO soldiers around here? And people were, again, credit to Sam Nujoma and his leadership, those that led with him. They had already inspired people that, because SWAPO soldiers who come from Angola, come into Namibia, ask us to cook for them because they were hungry a lot of times, and we hide them in the nearby bushes. We cook, we take food there, but you knew that if that was detected by the South Africans, that was the end of you. They will kill you.
There was no other way around.
Absolutely. And when people started not talking, when they asked, well, have you seen SWAPO soldiers here or whatever, because that was their standard question. Have you seen SWAPO soldiers around? And people would obviously say no. So they started threatening children. They would start beating up your child in order to squeeze an answer out of their mother or their father. And many parents, once they see their child being threatened or being pointed at with a gun, they'll then say, okay, fine. They were here yesterday, they went that direction, or whatever. Then you get beaten, you get assaulted. If you're lucky, if you're unlucky, you get shot. Then they proceed in pursuit of those soldiers. So the 80s were brutal.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And, you know, it was the steadfast leadership of Sam Nujoma in and outside the country, which was part of what pushed Namibians through, understanding the importance of that important finish line, so to speak. And the finish line was his inauguration now in 1990. And it marked the dawn of a new era in Namibia. The journey to independence was long and arduous, without a doubt, but Nujoma's unwavering determination and ability to unite Namibians under a common cause were key to its success. Nujoma's leadership in this period was characterized by his ability to balance armed resistance with diplomatic efforts, ensuring that Namibia's struggle remained on the global agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when the country became independent in 1990, because there was this preaching about unity and reconciliation, and sometimes people forget, for example, that people talk, and I don't want to take anything away at all from President Nelson Mandela, but he became South African president in 1994, and it was around that time that he really declared reconciliation formally, because he might have said it before, but formally he could only really effect that in 1994. In 1990, Sam Nujoma had already declared reconciliation. We are one people, black and white. We are going to build this country together. And he went beyond just rhetoric. If you look at the Sam Nujoma's, the first cabinet of Sam Nujoma, 1990, it was the most diverse, the most inclusive cabinet we've seen to date. We had our finance minister, Otto Herigel, was white. We had I think the Minister of Agriculture at the time, Anton von Weitersheim, who was of German descent, Namibian, of course, and many others. And he had also this blend. It was the most young, it was the youngest cabinet also in the history of our country, maybe understandably so. Everybody was, I remember Marco Ausiku, the late Marco Ausiku, and was it Pendukeni Ivula Itana or one, but I know it was Marco and someone else. They were the youngest cabinet ministers at the age of 39 or something to that effect. So in terms of age demographics, in terms of ethnic demographics, racial demographics, it was the most inclusive government that we had. And if that cannot inspire us going forward, then what will?
Indeed, indeed. We are still reflecting on the great life of Dr. Sam Shafiishuna Daniel Nujoma, who sadly passed away last night, 11:45 p.m. in Namibia. That was the 8th of February. Let's have a look at the visual as we pay tribute to this great man, and when we return, we talk about his presidency and nation building. right, we're now going to get into the presidency and nation building of Dr. Sam Shafiishuna Namibia, our founding father, our late founding father. Now, as Namibia's first president, Dr. Nujoma focused on national reconciliation, economic development, and social justice. His government prioritized education, healthcare, and infrastructure, laying the foundation for Namibia's growth. Now, key achievements during his tenure include the establishment of the University of Namibia in 1992, the construction of roads and hospitals, and the promotion of gender equality. Let's just marinate on those couple of points, Toivo.
Yeah, so I think our Republican history, that period between particularly 1990 to 1995, or perhaps the entire first decade of our independence was very difficult because you are transitioning from a war-ravaged country, you are transitioning from a country that is racially divided, and to narrow those cracks was no easy feat. And to convince especially white people at the time who had their genuine fears that maybe there will be retribution, there will be revenge. And there are people, black people, who harbored such ambitions. And to have really consolidated unity at a very sensitive stage of our transition, to the extent that none of those things went on to happen, was such a huge achievement. So national reconciliation was key. And once you have stabilized that part of leadership, you then can build onto that to say, okay, in terms of development, what do we do? In my village, Epoko village, which is in the Okalongo constituency near Utapi, we got our first water taps in 1994. That was 4 years after independence, and that is why it makes me a bit sad that to date there are villages 35 years later who still do not have tap water. And if I tell you how we survived prior to 1994 in terms of accessing water, you couldn't believe it. Because as a child, you only drink water at home. Then you go spend the entire day at school. The school doesn't have taps. And you are playing soccer and you are sweating, you get hydrated, and when you come home, you are almost fainting. Animals we had to drive them to different villages to access water, especially during summer, during the dry season. So water was the first taste of independence, or apart from not seeing military vehicles ravaging our Mahangu fields and stuff like that. And then that emphasis that you spoke about, the education, was really important. He was almost obsessed in a good way about education, but particularly those high fields, your technical fields, accounting, engineering,
yes.
And stuff like that. He was a key factor pushing UNAM to the very limit. You have to introduce these courses. You have to do what is possible. We need our country to have this level of capacities, and health, the same thing. Things were cheap. You could just walk into a clinic. Medicines are there. So those kind of things, but
it also means that when he left the country, it wasn't just advocacy. He was learning. He was learning what was happening in Tanganyika, learning about what's happening in Zambia, and figuring out a way to apply it in a way that it works for Namibia. And when you talk about navigating that reconciliation, we can stew on that a little bit more, because you can imagine folks like yourselves who were being approached by these soldiers, getting beaten, refusing them access, and seeing friends, family killed, now being told that is the side we ought to embrace in order for us to move forward. Just the cognitive dissonance alone in trying to navigate such a space also meant that a lot of people did not just follow Sam Nujoma when they agreed with him.
Absolutely.
I think they also followed him when they didn't agree with him, because ultimately it was just the trust in his leadership.
Absolutely. I mean, you see, the other presidents in our country, President Pohamba, who succeeded Nujoma, eventually Dr. Geingob, and now President Mbumba, they had the benefit of having served in government at a very high level, in cabinet already as ministers. Nujoma had no experience of that. He was coming straight from the bush, taking over a country as president, and from a very radical military background to consolidating democracy, because our democracy was consolidated in the 90s when we became independent. Every bit that we see today of that stability, tolerance, and everything was built and consolidated in the 90s during this man. As much as people used to say, because he had a strong character, he had a very strong personality.
Robust.
That sometimes people confused with
authoritarian.
Yes, but it wasn't anything like that. He was democratic. Of course, his third term was a bit controversial because they sort of exploited some technicalities, and then he got a third term. But Namibians did not care about many things. Namibians just wanted to be led.
Yes.
And Sam Nujoma brought that leadership.
Yes, without a doubt. Nujoma's leadership during Namibia's formative years was indeed pivotal in shaping the nation's identity and future. And his government also implemented land reform policies aimed at addressing historical inequalities. Although these efforts faced challenges and criticism, Nujoma's commitment to Pan-Africanism was evident in his support for liberation movements in other African countries, including South Africa as well as Zimbabwe. And as we are going to be wrapping up just this particular tribute section, we will be paying tribute throughout the day, throughout the weeks. Let's just talk about his life after presidency. After stepping down in 2005, Dr. Nujoma remained a respected elder statesman, and he continued to advocate for African unity and social justice. Through the Sam Nujoma Foundation, he focused on rural development and education, ensuring that his legacy would benefit future generations. He also remained active within SWAPO, offering guidance and support to the party and the nation. And in his later years, Nujoma became a vocal advocate for agricultural development, particularly through his involvement in green scheme projects, and he emphasized the importance of preserving Namibia's natural resources and cultural heritage, leaving a lasting impact on the nation's development trajectory. Nujoma's passing in 2025 has marked the end of an era, but his legacy as the father of the Namibian nation endures. Any last words, Toivo, before we come back at a later date, a later time to continue to honor the late founding father?
Yeah, so I wanted to reflect a little bit on his post-retirement legacy. He stepped down in 2005 as head of state, but because the last Congress of SWAPO was in 2002 at the time, there was no Congress until 2007. So for a period of 2 years, we had two centers of power, if you like. Nujoma as leader of the party and President Pohamba as head of state, which a scenario that many people fear today. They think that the head of state is going to undermine, one of them is going to undermine the other one, especially the party president, because you draw your power from the party. And Nujoma navigated that space very carefully. Of course, Pohamba was his man. They were good friends. But he allowed President Pohamba to run the country on his own terms as he saw them fit. In 2007, in the first Congress post-presidency, he then handed over the presidency to the party, and President Pohamba was elected as party president, consolidating power properly now as head of state and also as leader of the ruling party. From 2007, Sam Nujoma went into proper retirement. We barely saw him. If you see him at party events or national events, just in the back seat, not taking to the podium, not speaking. He will issue statements here and there about Happy Independence Namibia or Heroes Day or whatever. But he took a proper rest from politics, withdrew his hand, because he's a very, very powerful man.
Yes.
He could, if he wanted to, still control, he would have controlled things from his retirement.
Without a doubt.
I respect the level at which he withdrew himself from that entire process.
And I think as a nation, when we saw a 30-year-old man leave in exile and he was elected absent, we trusted his ability to lead. And when he left office, he trusted that he had led.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. I think that the legacy continues.
Yes.
I think the challenge, like I said earlier, the challenge for Namibians now is to say, what lessons do I learn from this great man? What do I adopt from his very colorful legacy?
Without a doubt. Dr. Sam Daniel Shafiishuna Nujoma, the founding father of Namibia, who departed at 11:45 p.m. on Saturday, the 8th of February 2025. May his soul rest in eternal peace.